Hello and welcome to the Hat Trick, presented by the ICC. I'm Charlie Stolitano, joined by Neil Barnett and Rocky Ray Hudson. We have an amazing show today that will focus on Manchester City winning their appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS as it's called, over alleged financial fair play violations. What does this mean for City? How will this affect financial fair play and UEFA? Is this the beginning of a new era? We'll discuss this and more. Just a reminder, check out all our past shows on internationalchampionscup.com, subscribe to the pod on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and give us a review. Don't forget to tune into the football show Wednesday mornings on Sirius XM FC. Okay, gentlemen, on Monday, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, ruled that Manchester City did not disguise equity funding as sponsorship contributions, and has therefore overturned the decision to ban the club from UEFA competitions. CAS did rule, however, that Man City failed to cooperate with the UEFA authorities and will be fined 10 million euros, $11.3 million, as a result, reduced from the 30 million euro fine initially set against Manchester City. All right, fellas, can't wait to get started. Let's jump in. I know I'm going to start with you, Ray. I know that you're a football man, and this aggravates you when we talk about the more, let's say, business aspects of sports. But you have to admit that it is a business now. It's no longer absolutely. Like just a fun thing.
No, it's an industry of galactical proportions, Charlie. There are billions, dollars, pounds, euros, shekels, call them what you like, all involved in the game now, and you're right. And it has grown like a mushroom in the dark. It's seemingly over the last 30, 40 years to be unrecognizable to the days when I used to go to watch Newcastle United at St. James's Park with my dad. Different elements where the clubs
and
were
Ray,
run
what were
by...
you paid as a kid? What were you paid at Newcastle United, if I can ask, those early days?
It was around about £15, £20 a week for the apprenticeship.
I thought you were paid. I thought you were paid in goats and sheep.
Newcastle brown ale, and a turkey at Christmas if you were lucky. It was very Dickensian, very Oliver Twist, but it was the clubs were run by Mr. Bumble as well. You know, the Mr. Squires rather, the rich. Local inhabitants, a different world now, and this decision now, Charlie, is seemingly it's a disaster for UEFA. They felt as if, and for Manchester City celebration, and incredibly got off from my understanding of it on a technicality. So the UEFA now are looking at themselves and how organized are they to take it to the Court of Arbitration, where they thought as if they had a very solid, impenetrable case, even though they knew going in there was some really very, very debatable points. Where was this time sensitive? Had they left it too late? And they kept on going, and Manchester City vehemently denying all of this completely all along and fighting it tooth and nail all the way down, saying this is not how it is being presented, and they got away with it. Now, for me, Manchester City and the big clubs, the celebration that will be going on, it isn't a question. For me, Charlie, it's where do UEFA go from here? How do they put their Humpty Dumpty back together again? Is it business as usual? I mean, there must be some serious debates going on in UEFA on how they reorganize their ship if they're going to make financial fair play not just transparent for all of us, but a set of rules that can be followed. I mean, where do they go from here?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to turn it over to Neil. I just want to clarify something. What the court said is the following: that what the Court of Arbitration for Sport said is the following: that City did not disguise equity funding as sponsorship contributions. And let me explain what that is for some of our listeners out there. It's very simple. This started way back when oligarchs were coming into the game with Neil's beautiful Chelsea, and it wasn't Chelsea per se, but they might own a company. The oligarch might own a company called, something gas company. And they would say, you know what, we're going to give a sponsorship to my soccer team. And really what they were doing was taking money from one pocket, putting it into the other. And this has become essentially very, very, let's say, exacerbated by the fact that countries now own and funds that are run by countries own these teams. So in simple terms, what they're saying is there was a company in Abu Dhabi that put down money as a sponsorship, and UEFA was claiming, well, that's not fair because that company is really owned by the country that owns the fund that owns the team. So you're really just taking it from one pocket and pretending it's a sponsorship. By the way, it happens everywhere. Look at Inter Milan. Suning is their sponsor. They own the team. Okay. Mediacom, owned by Fiorentina, is a company that functions in the Midwest here, a cable company, and they sponsor the club now. Well, those are deemed now legitimate, right? This gets really tricky when a country owns something, right? Doesn't it, Neil?
What this verdict proves is that Manchester City could afford a bigger legal team than UEFA could. And that is where we are in football now. The original idea of financial fair play was the biggest load of dog's feces that has ever been put together. And it was managed by the status quo big clubs, old money, to oppose new money coming into the game and threatening their hold on it. And UEFA, who needed the big clubs on board in order to avoid a breakaway and either a Super League or a new organisation that would manage the Champions League, went with those clubs. Now, what that did, it did two things. It opposed new investment coming into the game and spending big, like Abramovich had at Chelsea. And it took a snapshot when it came in 2009 of the state of European football, and it froze it. It froze it. And that's why Charlie Stinitana is so opposed to financial fair play. Because,
one of the reasons.
Because he is a man of justice, a man of equality, a man of so many assets. But when it comes to football, he sees only Italian. And Serie A was in a state of absolute low decline in 2009. And this snapshot has kept it there. And it's absolutely ludicrous. It is ludicrous. And as he has said, it's also ludicrous for Everton, who are in a state of decline at that stage.
Neil,
and any other club. So can I just tell you this, Rocky, which is really maddening. My club, which had come out of 2003 being bought by Roman Abramovich and spending oodles of money, had now become one of the dominant clubs in Europe. So we reached the Champions League final in 2008, and we reached the semi-finals in 4, 5, 7, and 9, 4 other years. So in 5 years, between 2004 and 2009, we reached the semi-finals and won one of those and reached the final. So we went with financial fair play because we wanted to remain the status quo. And our signings
you were the reason it was put in place originally by the big guys, but it was too late. The horse had left the barn already.
But they want to stop anyone else. And our signings over the next 3 years were crap. Or 5 years were crap. So now we no longer win a knockout game in the Champions League stage because we have doomed ourselves into that decline. But everything's changed, Rocky, because in 2009, a conglomerate put together by the UAE government bought Manchester City. It's states now.
Well,
go ahead, Rocky.
I'm just bewildered on the whole foundation of this ruling, because the ruling was brought in originally and it did a great job, financial play at the outset.
Not for Italians.
there was for Spain it did. I mean, there was a multitude of Spanish football clubs that were going to the wall.
Right,
that
and
were
Spain changed the
business.
TV. States changed the TV rights because in the old days, Getafe would get. Just to be clear, Getafe would get $1 million for €1 million for the entire year for their games, and Real Madrid, because teams would negotiate individually. And Real Madrid and Barcelona were getting over $200 million a year in TV rights. What Spain did had very little to do with financial fair play. What Spain did is they changed and made them
more
global
equitable.
TV rights were all distributed equally, so
Right.
more or less equally. So that's what really helped Spain.
Right, it was more equitable, but
Right.
the original intent for the financial play had been to also help some of these teams that were overspending. Now, I don't agree with it. I think we're all in unison here in stating that, the likes of the great Blackburn Rovers success under their great owner, Neil.
Jack
Walker, thank you. This was a club of his heart. It was a club of his childhood. He was in his later years in life, and he wanted to bankroll and finance an operation that would be competitive. And he backed it up with his own money, which he was entitled to do. I mean, what the hell is wrong with the team where it becomes really complex and then the table tilts on other sides is when these are state-owned operations, right?
That's correct.
And to that extent, the rich are going to get not just richer, but they're going to blow all the rest of them away. And we're seeing what will happen with Newcastle United. It happened at PSG. And these were the clubs, Charlie, right, that were arguing against the financial fair play.
That's right. They were the clubs arguing against it. But I wanted to just subtly a little bit, because Ray, this is something that you know very, very well. You know Pep Guardiola as well as anybody, right? I wanted to know how this verdict you think affects City. And I want you to talk specifically about the player staying that might have gone and the manager that might have gone.
It's enormous. They're getting a free lease of life now. They'll get stronger. Or why the hell not? I mean, UEFA seems to have this incapable of taking these cases under their rules involving financial fair play to the clubs and keeping them in guides and keeping them in lanes. This success for Manchester City on this technicality, because it was time restraints as much as anything, that the CES said, well, this is all irrelevant. Use your lane, Charlie.
Time barred, right?
Time barred. The horses left the building.
Right.
Elvis has left the building. The horse has left the stable.
Elvis has left the building.
Right. So and for 10 million, it's a slap on the wrist that they get. They're going to be happier than a dog with two tails. All the players are going to stay. Of course. They're going to be emboldened by it, I would think. This is celebratory stuff for Manchester City.
Look. The horse has left Elvis.
Neil, I think that Pep Guardiola could have been enticed to go somewhere else if he were.
I think he'd have seen out his contract. I think he might extend his contract now. I want to throw one at you, boys. I want to throw a big one at you.
Go ahead, kid.
Sergio Aguero is 32. Manchester City will earn approximately, depending on how well they do, an extra 200 million euros in the next two Champions League seasons that they would otherwise have missed. Gabriel Jesus is doing okay, but he's not looking a world beater. Will they sign a striker? Who's the striker who would best fit Sergio Aguero's place now? Well, for me, a guy who I think Barcelona have been linked with for the last 6 months, who I don't think would do a job at Barcelona, where the centre forward plays off the shoulder of the last defender. Certainly Luis Suarez does, rather than come off and looks for the ball like Aguero does. For me, the man who would fit Manchester City better than anyone is Lautaro Martinez
I
at
agree.
Inter Milan, and they can now afford to sweep both Barcelona and Inter out of the water.
No, exactly.
With,
Look,
that 200 million extra.
Yeah, the reality is this, guys, that Lautaro Martinez's contract clause that they had to activate by June 30, I think it was, right? For a buyout of 110 million, whatever it was. Now Inter can ask for 200 million. And by the way, he's 24 years old, or 23 or 24 years old. He's the talk of Europe. And I agree with you, Neil. They are one of the few teams that can now say, I can afford it. What are they going to do? Hit him with a $10 million fine?
Right, exactly. And that's the crux of this. They'll, as I said, they'll be emboldened. Harry Kane will be getting...
He's only 22, I'll tell you that, Charlie.
Rocky, I thought he was younger, yeah.
Rocky, don't you think that it's more Aguero replacement than Suarez replacement, Martinez?
Probably, yeah. No, that's on the tactical side of it. He'll fit, hand in glove, Neil. And it won't be long before another one comes to prominence somewhere out of South America, the way Vinicius did, and Rodrigo at Real Madrid. The next big thing. It won't be long, and Manchester City and the like will be all in there for him. Again, this is opening the door. It seems, Charlie, that it's giving these teams at the very top of the food chain a great opportunity. And I'm not saying to exploit the rules, but how much has this shown UEFA to be rather toothless?
Well, I mean, what you do is you pick on teams that can't afford to fight him. Neil said. The example I use is Roma all the time. And Jimmy Pilata, our dear friend and a good man, bought Roma a couple years ago. And Neil and I were talking about this on the show this morning, on the football show. A couple of years ago, they were fighting Liverpool for dominance in Europe. Now they're fighting to get into the Europa Cup. And they've sold Salah, Alisson, Marquinhos, Romagnoli, by God, Nangalan. The list goes on and on and on of players they've had to sell because Jimmy said every year we have to go in front of UEFA and explain that we're not really violating financial fair play. We're trying to play within the rules. And in the end, he doesn't have unlimited money. And Everton, even though they're rich, the other side of the table, they only make a couple $100 million a year in revenues. And they're like, well, now what do I do? I mean, they can't spend the money to get back into it. Meanwhile, whether you're Barcelona, you could waste money. Whether you're Manchester United, you could have some bad picks along the way, but you can afford to retool.
Okay, but this is my point. That I can't get my head around it. The idea that was brought in that I was talking about over 10 years ago to improve the financial health of the game. Over that short time, it's decreased into nothing. And is it worth the time and effort? Really, is it actually worth all of this time and effort? Or should it be, like Man City have proven, if it should just be kicked into touch and UEFA have to come up with a whole different set of rules in order to protect the clubs that maybe have all that good intention in the great ownership groups that come in. It seems to be that this is signaling a need for UEFA to readjust so much of their mechanism for the financial health of the game, whether it be at the very, very top, the likes of the Saudis coming in at Newcastle United, and at the bottom with the Darlington Football Club or whoever.
Right.
There's, I mean, where does UEFA go after this, Charlie?
Well, the first thing I think we need to respond to is what you were saying before, Rocky, about Rodrigo and Vinicius going to Real Madrid. Let's start with the old money. Can Real Madrid now, who I think is their record transfer fee, Hazard, 100 million euros?
Yeah, I think
Can
it
they-
is, but you know,
Can they buy the kind of can they invest the kind of transfer fees that Manchester City now and Paris Saint-Germain can invest?
well, here's the only thing I say is that Real Madrid and Barcelona and Manchester United are still far and away the three highest revenue generating clubs in the world. And what financial fair play says in its simplest terms, and it's a 40-page document, don't get me wrong, but in simple terms, you can only spend annually what you on transfers and salaries, what you bring in revenues. So Barcelona can afford to cock it up, if you will, by spending money on the Neymar money on Coutinho and Dembele and all these guys that they bought, and they haven't turned out great. They could retool again because they have the revenues coming in every more. Okay, when teams cock it up like AC Milan did, they don't have the revenues to make up for it, so they fall into financial fair play. They lose more than 30 million over the 3-year period. So this is really the issue to me. And look, I want to say this to you guys. I heard President Sefrin say, president of UEFA, say financial fair play has been a great success. It has done what it's meant to do. And this is your point, Rocky. This is your point and the right point, where teams were going out of business regularly, right? Now they have been now they've been saying that more teams are financially stable because they're forcing teams to work within themselves. But what he does also say is now we need to move into phase 2, which is to close the gap between the rich teams and the other teams. And the question is, even teams with an incredible history like AC Milan and a reasonable revenue stream, I'm not saying they're poor, they've got a couple $100 million, right? But they can't spend because they can't get into the Champions League to make that extra money.
Right.
Or the Italian league doesn't have the TV rights that England has, so they're handicapped there. So not just the Evertons and the Romas and the Sevillas or the Valencias of the world, but which are all like sort of middle financial tables, right? But how do they compete with, why is Bayern Munich winning every year? Why is Juventus winning every year? Why is PSG winning every year? You know, look, England's only competitive because they're all rich. You know, we can pretend all we want. And Spain is competitive with the top 3 because they're all rich. Mm-hmm. But after that, all you're doing now at this point is signing up to stay in the league. That's all you're doing. If you think there's a real chance of Getafe winning the league or Roma winning the league, it's
no chance.
No chance.
The Leicester cities of the world that you talk about. But the financial play is, you know, it's intended as well to kick out the teams buying success, coming in and just instead of earning it the way Leicester City did, and that to me, you know, it eats at my love of the game, and it is eroding away where it's becoming so predictable now, and so utterly you can forecast who's going to win the European Champions League, to the extent that competition from the old days that it used to be, where teams would be able to, because of their knowledge of football and their manipulation of in a legal way of getting better footballers through their own adventures, was admired. But now this and then the other counterpoint is, what's wrong with these people being put in place where the rules are being adhered to? I think this situation where Manchester City got their heads out of the noose in such an extent is going to cause seismic situations with UEFA in getting their ship in order. They need some real straight shooters and some real clear thinkers.
They need real teeth. You're listening to The Hat Trick, presented by the ICC. We've had so many great pods over the last few months, including feature interviews with Gareth Bale, Patrick Kluivert, and the stars of the 1994 U.S. men's national team. You can hear them all on internationalchampionscup.com, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and iTunes so you don't miss an episode. Back to the show. All right, gentlemen, let's hear what some of the managers in EPL had to say. We have some great audio from Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, and Jose Mourinho.
Incredibly happy for the decision and show that all the people said about the club, it wasn't true. And defend on the pitch what we want on the pitch. Jose and all the managers should know that we were damaged. We should be apologize because, like I said many times, if we did something wrong, we will accept absolutely the decisions for the UEFA or the CAS because you did something wrong. But we don't expect for Liverpool or Tottenham or Arsenal or Chelsea or Wolves or Liverpool and all the clubs are going to defend, but we can defend ourselves. We have the right to defend ourselves when we believe that what we have done is correct, is right. And 3 judges, independent judges, said this. So today is a good day. Yes, it was a good day for the football because we play with the same rules, the financial fair play for all the clubs in Europe, all of them. And we break these financial fair plays, we will be banned. We would have been banned. But we can defend ourselves because, like I said many times, the club believe it was right what we have done, and 3 judges gave us the situation, the reason that we were in the right path or we have done properly. But we cannot say we were damaged. So the people say that we're cheating, we're lying, and many times. The presumption of innocence was not there. And after, when it's happened and it was right, so of course we are incredibly happy because we can again defend what we have done on the pitch.
I'm happy that City can play Champions League next year because if I think about the league and City has 10, 12 games less, I don't see for resting players. I don't see any chance for any teams in the league, honestly. And apart from that, I have absolutely. I don't wish anybody anything bad and stuff. As I said, I'm happy that City can play Champions League, but I don't think it was a good day for football yesterday, to be honest. Just because I think FFP is a good idea. It's there for protecting teams, protecting the competition. That was the idea in the start, that nobody overspends, stuff like this, that the clubs can, before the season, have to make sure that the money they want to spend is based on the right sources, let me say it like this. And I am on top of that, I come from Germany. I'm educated in a completely different system. The majority of my life, we have a different club. We have different club structures. That's a club, really club structure and not owner-based system. So for me, we never, probably Germany, as long as they stick to that system, they never will have these kind of problems. It's just clear where you get the money from before the season. You get your license. If you don't get the license, then you can't be part of the competition.
If they are guilty, you should be banned. So it's also a disgraceful decision. So in any case, the decision is a disaster. Because if you are not guilty, you don't pay. I'm not saying Man City is guilty. I'm saying if you are not guilty, you don't pay. You are not punished, even with £1. I know that money for them is quite easy, but it's just the principle. Why you pay 8 or 9 million or whatever if you are not guilty? So if they are not guilty, the decision is a disgrace. If they are guilty, the decision is also a disgrace. Because if you are guilty, you should be banned from the competition. So my critique is not to Manchester City at all. I am nobody to criticize. I am nobody to know if they are guilty or if they are not guilty. My critique, of course, is for the decision power. Maybe they are unlucky. because maybe they don't deserve to be punished in one single pound, and they were punished in 8 or 9 million. So maybe they were unlucky.
Hearing Pep, he brings up a lot of very reasonable points, and he's angry at a couple people. He's particularly angry because 8 of the top 10 Premier League clubs asked CAS essentially to ban Manchester City next year. Even if they didn't have time to come up with a ruling, they should have been banned.
The two that didn't, by the way, were Manchester City themselves, obviously, and Sheffield United.
And Sheffield United, correct. Thanks, Neil. And so, but Pep says two things that are a little bit off to me. One is that, and it may be technical in a sense, but these aren't 3 judges. The way the Court of Arbitration for sport works is there's 3 lawyers that are arbitrators. One is picked by Man City, which you would think he's favorable to Man City. One is picked by UEFA, which you think he's favorable to UEFA. And then one is a neutral arbiter. They sit down and they come up with an arbitration. This isn't a court case. And what they decided in this case was that that Man City's, a lot of the allegation against Man City were time barred, which means that they can't be considered. It's like
why did they take it in the first place?
Well, here's how they got, and this is what's fascinating, Ray, is that UEFA, they look at the books in a sense, you come in and you offer what you have, right? Let's face it, they're not the Internal Revenue Service. They're not the Guardia di Finanza, where they're going to sit and go through all your books and everything else. It's a limited group of people that can ask you, what are you spending and what did you spend it on, right? But what happened is football leaks that came out of Germany disclosed some information that appeared to suggest that Man City had manipulated the rules. UEFA then took it up. This was time barred in a sense because they didn't discover it until later when football leaks leaked out this information.
That's unreal.
So UEFA said, no, I don't care if it's time barred. It's against our rules. We wouldn't have known about it. You would have got away with it. But WikiLeaks or Football Leaks, whatever, that's how we found out. Now it goes, and this is where he's wrong again. He's saying we should have a presumption of innocence in this world. Well, yeah, but you've already been stated that you're guilty by UEFA. So this was an arbitration to overturn guilt. It wasn't an arbitration to see whether or not they were guilty or not. And what the arbitrators found, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Neil or Ray, or Carell for that matter, is that they said, well, they may have done some of these things, but it's time barred. What we did find is that they didn't really help with UEFA's investigation. So the first time around, they weren't really honest, right?
Right.
So
and that's why they got fined the 10 million or whatever.
We're going to fine you
right?
10 million.
Right.
So let's start with Pep Guardiola and your guys' reaction to what he said.
Well, after that, the 10 million Jose is talking about, if they weren't guilty, they shouldn't have to pay £1. That's what he said. But the fact is that's why that 10 million fine, in contrast to the 200 million per year that they would have lost had they not been banned from the Champions League. That's how amazing this victory was for Manchester City. That's just an acknowledgement that Manchester City had breached some of the regulations by failing to cooperate with UEFA. That's what the fine was for. But you can understand, hey, Klopp and Jose, let's not beat about the bush here, lads. There's a lot of people that know that Manchester City were dancing on the edge. Dancing on the edge, and through the leaks and through the whistleblowers, if you like, they pointed out, but it didn't matter. In the end, it was the time barring of it, Neil, allowed them to get away on a technicality that you could hear it in Jose and you could hear it even in Klopp. They don't like it.
Yeah, they don't like that. Go ahead. I'm just saying, and we also heard from Jose and Klopp, right? So, and I was just talking to your reaction to Pep, but I'm glad you brought them both in. Go ahead, Neil.
Before the Industrial Revolution, the world didn't change much. incomes didn't change much for centuries. Then the Industrial Revolution came along and it was a whirlwind of change. Now the technological revolution has come and it's the greatest changes in history in our lives. And UEFA brought in financial fair play in 2009. And before it had even become effective, the world of football had changed because states had started buying football clubs. There's no way UEFA can take on a state. So
how are they going to look at the books of this country?
Exactly. So we need a new update.
Right.
And
by the way, Neil, I want to give you something else.
Hang on. This is what Pep, Jose, and Jurgen did not address. That we are in a new era. Now, someone said this week, a former UEFA employee said this week, we've got to change financial fair play because if we don't, the Champions League every year will be fought out between Saudi Arabia, Newcastle, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates because so much money will be going in.
Neil, then throw in the whole disconnect in that region between those countries. On top of all of that, UEFA has to deal with that. This is not the first time UEFA has went to battle armed and ready. This is not the first time. There's been others.
No, but the point is, Rocky, we are now. Whereas before, the issue of financial fair play was about individuals bringing money into football and affecting the status quo. Now it's about states bringing in the money and affecting the status quo. And I'll tell you what.
Yeah, but I think you're forgetting one thing, fellas. History. Because there are traditional wealthy clubs that are outside of Italy, because Italy had the financial crisis in 2000, the Calciopoli in 2006, the financial crisis in 2008 that hit everyone and hit Italy particularly hard. And also, I want to point something out. When you really in favor of what you said, Neil, technology. The internet for clubs exploded around 2008, 2009, where it actually became a moneymaker for clubs, right? And it changed everything. Popularity, global, it changed. Now a kid in India could see what's going on in Real Madrid's training room every day.
What I'm telling you now, Charlie, is this. This is only the beginning, because now that the big nations are buying into football clubs, next the big conglomerates will. Wait till Amazon buys a football club and decides it's going to win everything.
Can you buy AC Milan?
Wait until Google or Facebook decide they're going to buy a football club. So financial fair play has to maybe now play a bigger role than it tried to in 2009, but in a completely different way, and come up with a structure that the world of football can agree with. That, and Rocky, I'm sure that you will support this, that will firm up, give more solid foundations to our pyramid system where you can start from the bottom and get to the top.
Yeah. Well, how can they do it, guys? I mean,
that's it.
Is it the end of financial fair play as we know it? Is UEFA sitting there today fuming mad? I don't know. I don't know the answer. You know, are they fuming mad today saying, this is ridiculous? We have, and let me finish my statement. We have been, usurped here. This is nonsense. These guys broke the rules. They should be banned. Or are they sitting there today saying the following? Now Man City's not going to bring us to the Swiss Supreme Court. And now we're not going to go to the European Court, that does things actually for all of pan-Europe. I mean, are they sitting there saying, we dodged a bullet because, you know what? This whole financial fair play thing might be overturned at a higher court.
I don't. It's debatable whether Swiss Supreme Court would have even heard it after CAS. I don't think the history is very,
I agree with
very
you, Rocky.
deep.
I agree.
If it would have been taken there, this was a massive blow delivered to UEFA, and you just wonder how significant it is, how much UEFA, has got left to hit with these clubs.
Are they
these
exempt
clubs are
now,
going to
Rocky?
be
Can
looking
big
at, are they
clubs
going to
do
be
what they want to do?
Right,
Rocky,
exactly? What incentive is them for them to stick by the rules when this was a bad case presented? I ain't a lawyer, for damn sure. I don't know. You are, Charlie. But taking a case like this that was so, it seems strangely and poorly prepared when it's there right in front of them that this was a time-barred sensitive issue. The main driving component of UEFA really didn't exist, and it must have taken the CAS 5 minutes. There's nothing here. Your time's run out, and what, how much are the clubs now going to be in control of their approach to UEFA? UEFA, it seems to me, Charlie, that they need some serious restructuring.
Yeah. I agree with you, Rocky. Do they still have, but let me ask you the guys this. Do they still have teeth over everyone else except the big clubs? So in other words, is Jimmy still at the end of the year going to have to go and sit down with them and say,
yes,
I lost 23 million euros. Yeah, and they're like, well, that's too much. You're going to be banned
and I'll
next
tell
year.
you something else. He is, and I'll tell you something else, Charlie. Financial fair play hasn't worked. And the reason it hasn't worked, you've stated. Because Paris Saint-Germain, Juventus, and Bayern Munich win the league every year. Right. And in fact, Manchester City have spent the money that they've spent. And although they're the only Premier League club to defend the title in the last decade, they've only done it once. And they have never won the Champions League, despite all the money they put into it. And the great thing about football is it's harder than these bureaucrats ever think it is.
Okay, but the reason why England is more competitive and why Spain fights between Barcelona and Real Madrid, let's be honest, and one time in 15 years Atletico is going to win the league and we're all getting all bent out of shape that, oh my God,
Champions League this year.
Okay, let's hope so for your sake.
If they can overcome Atalanta.
Right, they can beat Atalanta. That'll be a game. It'll be a crazy game. Well, that would be.
It'll be like a training game, defense versus attack.
Yeah, exactly what we'd watch. I'm so looking forward to it. But at any rate, I mean, the reality is that the reason England is competitive is because they're all rich. The big six are all filthy rich. Mm-hmm. The big six aren't in the Italy.
The big six are 8th to 9th.
But you know what I'm saying, Neil, is that one of those big guys are going to win the league every year because they have so much money. Juventus has so much more money than everyone.
I'm going to disagree again because before Barcelona was so stupid as to pay all that money for Philippe Coutinho, Liverpool didn't have that money.
Yeah. They needed a little bit of luck. You're listening to The Hat Trick, presented by the ICC. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on internationalchampionscup.com or subscribe on Spotify and iTunes. To get more from Ray, Neil, and me, tune into The Football Show, weekday mornings on Sirius XM FC. This is the argument I had with Henry Winter, okay, where he said, well, it doesn't matter. The great writer from the Times. It doesn't matter for, I feel bad for teams in Italy, but they got to do it right. And what they need to do, he said, I'm paraphrasing him, is get a Richard Scudamore in there, who we all think is brilliant, the former head of
the guy who basically set up the Premier League market agreement with broadcasters.
Just did a great job and a great guy. I mean, I couldn't say enough good things. Okay. So, and he said, and the teams need to invest in a stadium. They need to invest in the training ground. They need to invest in players because those things aren't the youth system, because those things don't go against financial fair play. And I said, not to him on the air because we didn't have time. It was only a couple minutes. But here's how I equate it, Ray. That's like, you're a poor kid. You don't really understand money, right? And your parents say, we don't have any money. And the kid says, well, just go to the bank and get it. Right? I mean, if you don't have money, Jimmy Plata doesn't have $500 million to build a stadium or 100 or 200 million to build a training ground like Man City does. So it's a completely absurd concept that you think suddenly these guys who don't have any money are going to generate more revenues by spending money. It's a cycle that is so difficult to get out of that it only works, and it only works in England because they have an enormous TV contract. And that's really the only reason. Because in Germany, they've gone a different way. They've said, we're going to let the fans in essentially for free. What you guys make in one day in Chelsea takes them a whole season to earn at the stadium, okay? Because they charge their people $10 to get in, and they fill the stadium every day with 80,000 people. But their TV contract is rich, so they can support it. At the end of the day, what are we looking at here? Bayern Munich, 8 times in a row. Juventus,
Bayern Munich 8 times in a row because the Champions League gives them so much income.
It's a cycle
so by
that
being
happens.
in the Champions League,
they're in the Champions League every year, and that's what's happened to Juventus. And suddenly they build the stadium great. They have the money. They have the resources. They're owned by Fiat Chrysler. I get all that stuff. But most of Europe is not in that luxury position. That Barcelona, that is, the pride and joy of Catalan, and Real Madrid, there's a pride and joy of Spain. And they've built this thing, God bless them, over 100 years. I'm not saying anything, but they have an advantage now that they put this in place. No one can come along, not a Valencia that paid $600 million for the club. Right. He can't spend a couple $100 million a year.
Not a Marseille who won the Champions League in 1993.
Right, exactly. I mean, look at Sampdoria. They were in the Champions League final first year Barcelona ever won it.
Yeah, 1992.
You wouldn't even put them in the same galaxy as Barcelona. So the world's changed, and I think financial fair play has to change. But I'm going to ask you guys this. What can they do? What can UEFA do now at this point to bring it back? To do what Sefrin said, the president of UEFA, now phase 2 is to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots, if you will. I'm paraphrasing.
This was maybe pushing it a little bit, but the escaping of this noose from Manchester City's, you could relate it to the Bosman situation. Had they been found guilty and in that technicality hadn't existed, this time barrel, the time barred that you talk about, Charlie, had that not happened, you're looking at a situation that could have really detonated the whole foundation of how these clubs are going to be run and how they're going to be dictated to by UEFA, but they didn't.
Do you think there would have been a Super League or something from this? Do you think they would have said, I'm getting out of here?
I think they would be leading the charge on it, and I think they would have had a lot of people following along behind them.
Neil,
I don't think there would have been a Super League for a second. In fact, ironically, I think if
maybe
there is
not
to
immediately.
Be one,
Maybe not immediately, Neil,
Rocky,
but the wheels would have started turning with a hell of a lot more
I don't agree
grease.
with you, Rocky, because I think Manchester City will lead nothing because there is no fellow feeling for Manchester City in the Premier League or in Europe.
That may be.
Hang on. Ironically, I think there's more likelihood of moving towards a Super League now if UEFA lose control over the bigger clubs. Now, the Super League won't come. It'll in the end, it won't come. It'll never come. What will come, though, is a Super League in the Champions League because it'll be the same clubs every year.
It already is. Neil, 13 years ago, and then I want to hear final thoughts from you guys. When Giorgio and I were on the air, okay? And in 2009, I said the following. Giorgio, for the next 10 years, we're going to see the exact same clubs win the Champions League every year. And you know what? There'll be interlopers. And I'll give you 2. Atletico Madrid and Juventus. And now they are no longer interlopers. They are established giants in the industry. And so this year we have Atalanta. They could lose to PSG, and then they're just a little, what do you call it, asterisk down the road. But it already's there. Financial fair play assured that the Champions League would keep the same teams rich every year and would make them even richer and more popular. That's what it's done already.
I think that we need to bring in a tax system that will,
like a luxury tax they have in it's voluntary in baseball. Just to explain to our listeners that you have a certain salary cap in Major League Baseball, right? In the NFL, I need to explain this and I apologize. In the NFL, you have a hard cap. What you have is you can only spend a certain amount of money. Every team spends the same. It works because we're the only country that has a professional American football league, period. It doesn't work in Europe because by the rules of the European Union, you can't force one country to do something in another country when it comes to a salary cap, because it's going back to your part, Rocky, when you talked about the Bosman ruling, you can't, that's a restraint of trade. You can't do that. You could, what they do in baseball is they say, we don't want a hard salary cap. But if you're the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox and you want to spend more than $200 million a year, we're going to fine you. So let's say the Boston Red Sox sent $250 million, and they don't have transfers there, but they have salaries, right? Then they have to pay $50 million to the rest of the league. Okay?
Well,
and the money's distributed to the rest of the league.
In soccer, you could bring it in for both salaries and transfers and redistribute the money that way. And it would go some way at least to bringing a level playing field.
So let's say where would it be distributed? So let's go for an example. It's a great point, Neil. So let's say Real Madrid or Barcelona wants to buy 4 players for 300 million euros. The cap that we've put in place is 200 million, right? Blah, blah, blah. They have to give 100 million. Who does it go to? Does it go to Europe? Does it go to, all across the Champions League teams? Does it go to just in Spain? What happens to the teams that are going to get relegated? There's a lot of subtleties here because suddenly you're Malaga, you're going to be relegated. Oh, but good. Barcelona and Real Madrid overspent, so I get another 50 million this year.
Yeah. Well, these are the kind of things that the bureaucrats should be working on, rather than the things that they have been working on. We need a system that is going to support the pyramid, where you start from the bottom and you can get to the top, and where if you fail, you go back towards the bottom. That is what we need. We have just had a weekend in the Premier League where Norwich got relegated, but the 4 teams fighting relegation above them all won.
Yeah.
That is what is healthy about football. They won because they had to. In a structure like MLS, that just wouldn't happen. For the bottom 5 win at the climax end of the season, because they're not fighting for their lives.
And Neil, let me point out the salary cap in baseball quite often is criticized for the following reason: the lower teams that get the money don't spend it on players; they just keep it. So the owner who's lazy or stupid or whatever, or who's a very shrewd businessman, says, good, I got 20 million extra. Yeah. I'm not going to spend. They're going to keep it.
But it'd be different if it was going to get relegated.
Exactly.
So I think there is something really worth investigating here. And I'll tell you 2 things. The smaller clubs would all support it, obviously, but a lot of the bigger clubs would support it, other than those owned by states or those who are about to be owned by global conglomerates. And I'll tell you, it's coming. Amazon FC, Google FC, Facebook FC. And let me tell you, listeners, I will still be supporting Chelsea when we are in the 4th division and facing Newcastle in the bankrupt derby of the former Premier League clubs.
Oh, Neil, that was beautiful. Ray, final thoughts? Because Neil just gave us his.
Yeah, wonderful, Neil. listen, this was a big escape for Manchester City, the great escape in many ways. And I don't think we heard it from Klopp and we heard it from Mourinho. They will not be getting away with this in other departments in terms of their profile. It doesn't look good for them. But on the other side, Charlie, UEFA look as if they're a little bit stuck in the past in some ways and are in need of a serious rejuvenation. Whether or not it's through the entire system, but UEFA's got to look in their own mirror and see how much of the trust they can get back in enforcing this financial fair play, which we've said in this podcast has many great attributes in the past. There's a different world out there now, and both good and bad, the billionaire owners, the state proxies coming in, how much of it did they want the free-for-all? And what are UEFA going to be able to do about it? From here be dragons.
My final thoughts are really simple. I think something needs to be done. I think that the concept of financial fair play in its most let's say healthy idea was to make sure that teams stop going bankrupt, and that's a good thing. But it has only reinforced the rich getting richer and the poor staying poor. And the gap is just too much right now. And, maybe the simple answer is almost voluntary. Look, you're invited into the Champions League. You don't have to be in the Champions League if you don't want to. So maybe there needs to be if you want to be in the Champions League, this is what you need to do. And maybe it needs to be a luxury tax like you're saying, Neil. Maybe it's got to be voluntary. But you know what? I think what shows us, if people can get away with things, they do. That, unfortunately, is the lesson we've learned here, that human nature is such
it ain't illegal unless you're caught.
That will do it for today's episode of The Hat Trick, presented by the ICC. To hear all of our recent exclusive interviews, head to internationalchampionscup.com or subscribe to the pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week with shows on Tuesday and Thursday. Until then, for Neil Barnett and Rocky Ray Hudson, I'm Charlie Stilitano. A domani!